Lara had always lived in the shadow of her mother, Valeria, one of the most powerful Altari leaders in the galaxy. From the day she was born, her mother had high expectations Lara could never meet. Every step she took seemed clumsy. Every word she spoke sounded weak, and every attempt to shine only brought disappointment to Valeria's eyes. "You are useless," her mother often said, her voice cold and sharp, like shards of ice cutting through Lara's heart. Those words echoed in Lara's mind day and night. Even when she tried her best, she felt invisible, unworthy, and hopeless. The Altari society valued strength, intelligence, and precision above all else. In their eyes, weakness was unforgivable. Lara had watched her older cousin rise quickly in the ranks, admired and praised, while she remained the subject of endless criticism. The more she tried, the more she stumbled. The more she stumbled, the louder her mother's voice rang in her ears. She began to believe her mother's harsh words. Maybe she really was useless. Then came the day Lara dreaded most, the day her mother announced her marriage. But this was not just any marriage. It was a political move, meant to strengthen alliances between species. Lara expected another Altari, someone equally precise, ambitious, and powerful. But her mother's decision shocked her completely. "You will marry a human," Valeria said, her tone final, leaving no room for protest. Lara froze. Humans were weak, fragile, and chaotic. They were emotional, unpredictable, and, in Valeria's view, beneath the Altari. "You, a human?" Lara stammered, her voice barely audible. Her mother's eyes were sharp. "Yes, maybe a human can fix what you have failed to become. Maybe they can help you find some usefulness." Lara felt her stomach twist. She wanted to cry, scream, or run away, but she couldn't. In Altari society, defiance was shameful, and Valeria's word was law. She had no choice. The human she was about to marry was a stranger, a creature she barely understood, a species her people looked down upon, and yet she was expected to spend her life with him. The thought filled Lara with fear. She imagined the whispers of her relatives, the judgmental glances at ceremonies, the ridicule she would face for bringing a human into her family. How could someone so primitive ever live up to her mother's standards? How could she herself survive this arrangement without being crushed completely? That night, Lara sat alone in her quarters, staring at the ceiling. She remembered the last time her mother had spoken to her softly. It never happened. Valeria's words had always been cold, precise, and cutting. Lara's heart ached with loneliness. She wondered if anyone could ever see her differently, if anyone could ever think she was enough. The idea of a human seemed impossible, yet it was now her reality. For the first time, a small spark of hope flickered inside her. Maybe humans were not what her mother believed. Maybe there was something in them, some strength she could never imagine. But hope felt dangerous. It could be crushed just like everything else in her life. Lara closed her eyes and whispered to herself, "I have to survive this. I have to prove something someday." She didn't know what that something was yet. Strength, worth, freedom from her mother's shadow. She only knew she could not stay broken forever. And so, with her heart heavy and her mind full of fear, Lara prepared for a life she had never wanted, a life with a human. She had no idea that this strange, unpredictable being would not only change her life, but also teach her something her mother never could, that even those called useless could rise, shine, and become extraordinary. The day of the marriage arrived faster than Lara expected. The Altari palace was magnificent as always, with shining crystal walls and floating lights that painted the halls in soft blues and golds. Guests from countless planets had come, dressed in elaborate garments, whispering behind their hands about Lara's unusual match. And then there was Daniel. He was nothing like the Altari. He stood slightly shorter than most, with plain clothes and a quiet demeanor. His brown eyes, however, were calm, warm, and steady. For a moment, Lara felt a flicker of fear mixed with curiosity. How could someone so simple, so human, ever fit into this world? Her mother's voice echoed in her head. "A human can fix what you have failed to become." Lara wanted to resist, to reject, but she had no choice. The ceremony was formal, precise, and elegant. Every word spoken was in the Altari language, a symphony of sharp sounds that humans found difficult to pronounce. Daniel struggled at first, his voice uneven, but he persisted. Lara watched him, expecting embarrassment, failure, but instead he smiled politely and tried again. That small determination caught her attention. After the formalities, they were alone. Lara expected him to be awkward or cold, like the others she had met in her life. Instead, Daniel looked at her with genuine curiosity. "You're nervous," he said softly. There was no judgment, no ridicule, just an observation that startled her. No one had ever said anything like that to her without anger or scorn. I guess," Lara whispered, unsure what else to say. He smiled, a small, reassuring curve of his lips. "That's okay. I'm nervous too. But we'll figure this out together." Lara blinked. Together. The word was strange in her ears. No one had ever offered her companionship without a hidden agenda. Daniel's words were simple, almost human, but they carried a weight she could not ignore. For the first time, someone looked at her and saw her, not the useless daughter her mother insisted she was. The days that followed were difficult. Altari customs were complex and strict. Lara struggled with each ritual, each rule, each expectation. Daniel, however, never criticized her. When she stumbled over a ceremony, he quietly whispered instructions. When she felt overwhelmed, he offered a hand to hold or a calm smile to steady her nerves. Slowly, she began to feel a strange warmth, a sense of safety she had never known. Her mother, watching from a distance, remained unimpressed. She had married Lara off to a human to teach her a lesson, yet the human seemed competent. Lara's mother scowled, but deep down she felt a twinge of unease. The human was not failing. He was helping Lara survive. And survival in the Altari world was everything. Lara began to see the human in ways she had never imagined. Daniel was not perfect. He made mistakes, sometimes clumsy, sometimes unsure, but he faced every challenge without fear. When the palace servants sneered at him or when the elders doubted his abilities, he never reacted with anger or pride. He remained patient, persistent, and kind. Slowly, Lara began to admire him, not just for what he could do, but for who he was. Late at night, when the palace was quiet, Lara would watch him work with patience, study the customs, and speak gently to the children of visiting dignitaries. She realized he possessed a strength unlike the Altari, not the kind taught in schools or through politics, but the kind born from heart and courage. Lara began to feel something she had never allowed herself to feel. Hope. Hope that maybe her life could change. Hope that maybe she could become someone who mattered. Not through perfection, not through fear, but through courage, love, and trust. And Daniel, the human, had shown her that it was possible. Even as her mother remained judgmental and cold, Lara began to feel a quiet rebellion growing inside her. Maybe she was not useless. Maybe, with Daniel by her side, she could survive this world and even thrive. She did not yet know how far this path would take her. But for the first time in her life, she felt ready to walk it. Life in the Altari Palace was never easy. And for Lara, it became a constant test of patience, courage, and endurance. From the moment she married Daniel, whispers followed her like shadows. Altari nobles and distant relatives looked down upon her, questioning why she would tie herself to a human. Some snickered when she passed. Others openly criticized her at gatherings. A human will ruin her, they said. She will never be respected with him. Lara felt the sting of every word, each one digging deeper into the fragile confidence she was trying to build. Sometimes, late at night, she would sit by the window of her chamber, staring at the stars and wishing she could disappear. Her mother's voice haunted her, cold and sharp. "You are useless. Maybe this human can fix that, but I doubt it." Daniel noticed her struggles. He never mocked her or belittled her the way the Altari did. Instead, he offered something far more valuable: patience. When Lara stumbled during ceremonies or mispronounced the complex Altari language, he gently corrected her. When she felt humiliated in front of the elders, he whispered, "It's okay. You did your best. That's what matters." At first, Lara resisted. She had been trained her whole life to fear mistakes, to hide weakness, to avoid judgment. But Daniel's quiet faith began to chip away at her insecurities. Slowly, she realized that his presence gave her something her mother never had: support without conditions, love without judgment, and trust in her abilities even when she could not see them herself. The Altari, however, were relentless. During one important council meeting, Lara was asked to present an idea on interspecies trade, a task that would have terrified her before. As she stumbled over her words, the elders exchanged disapproving glances. Lara's face burned with shame. But then she felt Daniel's hand gently press hers under the table, steadying her. She took a deep breath, held her head high, and continued. Each word came with more confidence than the last. By the end, she had not only completed her speech but had impressed even the skeptics. Despite these small victories, doubt often crept in. Lara wondered if she truly belonged among the Altari, if she would ever be seen as worthy, or if she was destined to live as the useless daughter forever. Daniel never let her dwell too long in despair. He reminded her of the small triumphs, of the moments she had succeeded when she thought she would fail. He showed her that strength did not always come from perfection, but from persistence, courage, and heart. Lara began to notice a change in herself. She walked taller, spoke more firmly, and no longer let every harsh word wound her so deeply. She started to embrace her mistakes as lessons, learning from them instead of fearing them. And through it all, Daniel was there, not as a teacher, not as a savior, but as a partner who believed in her when no one else would. The palace halls were still filled with whispers, but Lara felt stronger. She discovered that the power to survive and even thrive was not in matching the Altari's cold perfection, but in embracing her own humanity, her own courage, and the love that Daniel offered so freely. Slowly, she began to understand something remarkable. Being seen, being trusted, and being loved could give her a strength no Altari title or skill could ever provide. One evening, Lara stood on the balcony with Daniel, watching the twin moons rise over the crystal spires of the palace. "Do you think they will ever accept us?" she asked quietly, a tinge of sadness in her voice. Daniel smiled, calm and unwavering. "They don't have to. We have each other. That's what matters. You're not useless, Lara, you never were, and even if they never see it, I do." For the first time in her life, Lara believed him. She realized that the struggles, the whispers, and the ridicule were no longer chains. They were stepping stones. And with Daniel by her side, she began to walk a path that would transform not just her life, but the legacy of her family for years to come. Years passed, and life with Daniel continued to shape Lara in ways she had never imagined. The once timid, insecure girl was no longer the useless daughter her mother had labeled. She had grown stronger, braver, and more confident. But the greatest change came when she gave birth to their daughter, Ava. Ava was small and fragile at first, like most humans, but her eyes held curiosity and intelligence beyond her age. Lara looked at her daughter and felt a love she had never experienced before. For the first time, she understood what it meant to nurture, to protect, and to guide. She wanted Ava to grow up knowing that mistakes were not shameful, that weakness was not failure, and that courage could come from the heart, not from titles or perfection. Daniel watched Lara with quiet pride as she cared for Ava. He admired her patience, her tenderness, and the gentle way she encouraged their daughter to explore. He often whispered to Lara, "She's learning from you. You are showing her how strong she can be." Lara smiled, but deep inside she remembered the years of ridicule and doubt she had endured. Now, she was building a world for Ava that her mother could never have imagined. A world filled with love, trust, and hope. Valeria, Lara's mother, watched from afar. She had not visited often, believing her daughter's life with a human would be a mistake, a failure. But she could not hide the growing unease she felt as she observed Ava. The child was clever, brave, and compassionate. She asked questions, solved problems, and even challenged the elders politely but firmly. Valeria realized, with a pang of regret, that she had never seen her own daughter possess such strength, and now it had passed to her granddaughter. The true turning point came during a grand interspecies summit. Leaders from across the galaxy gathered, discussing trade, alliances, and diplomacy. Lara, once timid and unsure, was now asked to lead a critical negotiation with humans and Altari representatives. She felt the old fear rising, but Daniel's hand on her shoulder reminded her she was not alone. Taking a deep breath, she stepped forward and spoke with clarity, intelligence, and calm authority. The room fell silent. Lara's words carried power, not because of her title, but because of her confidence and insight. She negotiated with skill, finding solutions that pleased both sides, and even the most skeptical Altari nodded in respect. Daniel watched from the side, a quiet smile on his face. Lara felt a surge of pride, not in herself alone, but in the life she had built with him, the family they had created, the love that had given her courage. Valeria could not deny it any longer. Her daughter, once deemed useless, had become a force to be reckoned with. And the human she had dismissed, the one she thought would drag Lara down, had been the reason. The realization struck her with a cold, uncomfortable clarity. She had been wrong all along. That night, as Lara and Daniel tucked Ava into bed, Lara felt a new sense of purpose. She understood that life's strength came not from avoiding failure, but from facing it with courage, love, and trust in those who believed in you. Daniel had shown her that strength could be gentle, patience could be powerful, and love could transform weakness into greatness. Lara looked at her daughter sleeping peacefully and whispered softly, "You are going to be amazing, Ava. You will learn to be strong, brave, and kind, just like your father taught me." Daniel kissed her forehead, and together they knew that the future was bright, not because of power or perfection, but because of the human heart that had changed everything. Valeria, watching from her distant chambers, felt a knot in her chest. She realized the truth she could not escape. The useless daughter had flourished. The human had taught Lara what no Altari ever could. And now she could only watch as her granddaughter grew under the guidance of a family she had once dismissed, too proud and blind to understand. Valeria could no longer deny it. Watching her daughter Lara grow into a strong, confident leader filled her with a mixture of awe and bitter regret. Every harsh word she had ever spoken to Lara replayed in her mind like a cruel echo. Useless. Clumsy. Weak. She had believed she was guiding her daughter, shaping her for greatness, but in reality, she had only weighed her down with doubt. And then there was Daniel. The human she had once scorned, the one she believed would fail her daughter, had done the impossible. He had given Lara strength through patience, love, and quiet courage. Valeria watched as he guided negotiations, comforted their daughter, and supported Lara in every way. She could feel her own pride twisting into shame. The human had succeeded where she had failed, not through power or authority, but through heart. It was during the next Grand Council that the truth hit her fully. Lara, leading a critical discussion on interspecies trade, displayed clarity, courage, and compassion that few had expected. Her voice, calm but firm, commanded attention. The elders nodded in respect, the diplomats listened carefully, and even skeptical Altari finally recognized the value she brought. And Daniel by her side offered quiet guidance only when needed. His presence had made Lara stronger, braver, more capable than her mother could have ever imagined. Valeria felt a pang of deep regret. She had thought she was shaping her daughter for greatness, but instead, she had suffocated her with judgment, and the human she had looked down upon had been the key to Lara's transformation. Every lesson Lara had learned, every ounce of confidence she now possessed, came not from Altari training or superiority, but from the love and trust of someone Valeria had once called weak. That night, Valeria approached Lara quietly. She hesitated, unsure if her words could undo years of pain, but she knew she had to try. "Lara," she began, her voice softer than Lara had ever heard. I misjudged you. I believed you were useless, clumsy, weak. I was wrong. And Daniel. He has shown me my mistake. You are not only strong, you are brilliant." Lara paused. For years she had carried the weight of her mother's words. She remembered the nights she cried alone, the moments she felt invisible, and the endless fear of failure. She looked at her mother, a mixture of emotion on her face, relief, anger, and sadness. Finally, she spoke softly, her voice steady. "Thank you for saying that. But it took a human to show me what you never could. He didn't just help me survive. He taught me to believe in myself." Valeria lowered her gaze, feeling the truth in her daughter's words. She had tried to teach Lara strength, but she had failed. Daniel had taught her daughter something far more important: courage, compassion, and the power of love. And now Lara had become a leader, a mother, and a force her mother could no longer control. Even Ava, their daughter, was learning from them both. She had inherited her mother's courage and her father's patience. Lara watched Daniel play with Ava, guiding her gently, correcting her mistakes with kindness rather than anger. She realized that this family, formed against Valeria's wishes, had created a new kind of strength, a strength built not on perfection, but on heart, resilience, and trust. For the first time, Valeria felt the weight of her own pride. She had dismissed Lara, she had dismissed Daniel, and she had underestimated the human heart. And now she could only watch as Lara and Daniel built a legacy she had never envisioned, one that proved that even the weakest, most underestimated beings could rise to greatness. Valeria whispered to herself almost in disbelief, I was wrong. I should have seen it sooner. But it was too late to undo the past. All she could do now was watch and learn, and perhaps in time, she might understand what humans and love could truly teach even the proudest of Altari. Life was never easy for Lara, even after she had earned a measure of respect. The Altari still watched her closely, waiting for any sign of weakness. But now she no longer feared their judgment. She had Daniel by her side, and together they faced every challenge that came their way. One day a crisis erupted. A neighboring planet, once a trusted ally, suddenly threatened to withdraw from a critical trade agreement. The Altari leaders were tense, worried that the fragile human negotiations would fail. They turned to Lara, hoping that the daughter they had once called useless could salvage the situation. Lara felt a familiar flutter of fear but quickly pushed it aside. She had faced fear before and survived. This was no different. Daniel stood beside her quietly, observing, understanding, and ready to support. He did not speak over her, did not try to control the negotiations. He simply offered subtle guidance, reminding her of the strategies they had discussed in private, encouraging her to trust her instincts. Lara felt a surge of confidence. With him beside her, she could face anything. The meeting began. Lara spoke first, calmly presenting solutions that balanced both Altari interests and the human perspective. She suggested compromises that respected the neighboring planet's concerns without sacrificing her people's needs. The room was tense. Many doubted that a human-influenced approach could succeed. But as Lara continued, her voice steady, her ideas clear, the room began to shift. Eyes that once doubted her now looked on with respect. The alien leaders saw not just an Altari, but a mind capable of reasoning, empathy, and courage. At one point, the negotiations threatened to collapse. The neighboring planet demanded terms that would have humiliated the Altari. Lara felt panic rising, but Daniel's hand on hers reminded her to breathe. She looked at him and found calm. She spoke with honesty, firmness, and heart. She appealed not just to logic, but to shared values, shared hopes, and the potential for long-term trust. Slowly, the opposition softened. Slowly, they agreed. When the meeting ended, Lara exhaled, overwhelmed by relief and triumph. Daniel squeezed her hand, a small smile on his face. You did it, he said simply. No praise, no fanfare, just quiet acknowledgement that meant more than the loudest accolades. Lara smiled back, feeling the truth in his words. She had done it. Together they had done it. Word spread quickly among the Altari leaders. The useless daughter had not only survived, but she had excelled where many adults had failed. And the human, the one her mother had dismissed, had proven his worth, not by power or status, but by being the calm, steady force that allowed Lara to rise. Valeria watched from her chambers, her chest tight with emotion. She felt pride, shame, and awe all at once. Her daughter, whom she had doubted for so long, had achieved what even she could not. And the human, Daniel, had been the key. Without him, Lara might have faltered, but with him she had shone brighter than anyone had expected. That evening, Lara and Daniel returned home exhausted but triumphant. Ava ran to them, clapping her small hands. Mom, Dad, you did it. You saved everyone. Lara lifted her daughter, hugging her tightly. Daniel joined in, and for a moment they felt the warmth of family, of love, and of victory. Lara realized something important that night. Success was not about perfection, power, or titles. It was about heart, courage, trust, and partnership. The very things that the Altari had dismissed, emotion, compassion, persistence, had carried them through the hardest challenge yet. Daniel's humanity had been the hidden strength they both needed, and as Lara looked at him, her partner, her love, and the father of her child, she understood why her mother's words had been wrong. Humans were not weak. Love was not weakness. Courage came in many forms, and the most extraordinary power often came from the most unexpected sources. The Altari would remember this day. They would remember Lara's brilliance and Daniel's quiet strength. And Valeria finally understood that sometimes the greatest lessons could not be taught through authority or criticism. They could only be shown through heart, action, and unwavering support. Years later, the Altari still spoke of Lara, the daughter once called useless, but now their whispers carried respect, admiration, and sometimes disbelief. She had risen above every expectation, not through cruelty or perfection, but through courage, compassion, and the quiet strength of love. Daniel had remained her steadfast partner through it all, teaching her that even the simplest heart could achieve greatness. Lara often thought back to her mother's words, once so sharp and cruel, "You are useless." She had carried them for years, letting them shape her fear and doubt. But now she understood that those words no longer defined her. They were a shadow she had outgrown, a memory that had fueled her growth. Through struggle, patience, and love, she had become someone worthy, not because her mother said so, but because she had discovered her own strength. Her daughter, Ava, had grown into a remarkable young girl. Bright, curious, and fearless, she challenged conventions, asked questions, and faced the world with a mix of courage and kindness that reminded Lara of Daniel. Lara and Daniel had raised her with care, showing her that mistakes were not failure, that kindness was power, and that bravery often came from standing for what was right, even when others doubted you. Valeria, now older and quieter, sometimes watched them from a distance. She had once believed humans were weak, that Lara was useless, and that love was a liability, but she had seen the truth unfold. Humans could inspire strength, love could teach courage, and even the useless could become extraordinary. She felt regret for the harsh words, the constant criticism, and the lost years of doubt she had planted in her daughter's heart. But she also felt awe. Lara had grown beyond her expectations, and Daniel had helped her achieve it in ways no Altari ever could. One evening, Lara, Daniel, and Ava walked through the palace gardens, the twin moons casting silver light across the crystal flowers. Lara stopped and looked at Daniel, her hand in his. "Do you know what's amazing?" she asked softly. Daniel smiled. "What?" "You showed me a world I never knew existed," Lara said, her voice gentle but firm. "A world where love, patience, and courage can be stronger than fear or pride. You made me believe in myself in ways my mother never could. You helped me become someone I never thought I could be." Daniel's eyes glimmered with quiet pride. "You were always capable, Lara. I just reminded you to see it. Strength is inside you, waiting to grow." Lara looked down at Ava, who laughed and ran ahead, chasing the light of a floating crystal. "And now our daughter knows it too," she whispered. "She will never doubt her worth the way I did. She will carry strength, compassion, and courage into the future." Valeria watched them from the edge of the garden, a quiet tear tracing her cheek. She approached slowly, hesitant, unsure if her presence would be welcome. But Lara smiled and extended her hand. "Mother," she said softly, "I've learned that we all grow in our own time. You can still be part of this family if you choose to try." Valeria nodded, feeling the weight of years lift slightly from her shoulders. She realized that power was not in dominance or harsh judgment, but in humility, understanding, and the courage to admit mistakes. She had lost years of seeing her daughter clearly, but she could still learn from the love Lara and Daniel had built. In that moment, under the twin moons surrounded by crystal gardens and soft starlight, Lara felt the fullness of her journey. She had transformed from a timid, insecure girl into a leader, a mother, and a woman who understood her own worth. She had faced doubt, ridicule, and fear, and she had risen, not alone but with a human who believed in her, who loved her unconditionally, and who had taught her the true meaning of strength. And as Valeria silently watched, Lara realized the most important truth. Even the useless could rise, shine, and change the world. The Altari could learn from humans, children could learn from love, and families could grow stronger through understanding. Humanity had proven itself extraordinary, not in power, but in heart. And in that moment, Lara knew that nothing could ever diminish the light they had created together.